Well, the Vampire Coast and undead pirates of the Galleon's Graveyard have been plundering that booty for over a month now, and as we head towards the holidays, we can expect radio silence for a bit as the Total War teams leave for vacation. But we've still got a lot to talk about, because the new content drop is somewhere over the horizon. We've still got the Festag patch currently in beta, and likely to land sometime before Christmas, and some big questions to discuss regarding what comes next for the Total War Warhammer series. So, let's get that Festag stuff out of the way first. Just last week, Creative Assembly released a beta that updated red skill trees for older factions to be more in line with their New World counterparts. This had kind of been an issue since Mortal Empire's launch, really, where just by comparing, say, Krokgar's skill tree to the one for Karl Franz, you could see some really big disparities between the content on offer. Old World trees were basically just being completely outshone, were really beginning to show their age, so it's great that they're finally being addressed and being brought up to speed. The issue, though, is that the new changes cause some more problems, which is nothing new to the Creative Assembly patch system. The biggest one being that unique skills for lords like Throg and Volkmar, and a decent chunk of other legendary lords also disappeared, which kinda defeats the purpose, right? If we want updated awesome skill trees for old world lords, we sure as hell do not want to see their unique lines up and vanish alongside the patch, so definitely needs more work before the beta goes live. But that's a free update, one of many CA will need to release as we move forward to ensure that the content gulf doesn't keep getting wider as we head towards Total War Warhammer 3. But what about paid content? We know DLCs are in the works, so what's coming next? Well, Lizardmen vs Skaven Lord Pack is first on the agenda. They're the only factions in the game that don't have their Regiments of Renown. Lizardmen haven't even gotten a Lord choice through Free DLC yet. They don't have updated campaign mechanics, and there's even examples of minor races with features that would have been more fitting for the major ones that we already have. Remember Vampire Coast and Pirate Coves? Building secret settlements within enemy settlements? That sounds like it would fit very nicely with a certain breed of humanoid ratmen that we already had in the game. Is it a great thing that the Vampire Coast campaign is awesome and really well made? Yeah, of course, one of the best content drops in Total War's history, but is it good that they completely outshine what's on offer for a major race that launched less than a year before? Not really. Even the New World races aren't exempt from the feature creep that has continued unabated since Game 1, so that needs rectifying, and the only way to do so is to release more content for them. The Rat and the Serpent DLC is coming, but I think there's a fairly good chance we won't see it until after the release of Three Kingdoms in March, which will be really damn annoying, but something we just kind of have to deal with because the CA continues to move development teams towards pursuing Lu Bu and Chaos in Game 3. We are going to see less content from Warhammer 2 in the build-up to those games. So it'll be 10-1, the Prophet of Sotek, facing off against Greyseer Thankwall or Ikit Claw in the Rat and the Serpent DLC. Thankwall is certainly more iconic, but Ikit Claw fits the theme of the missing Skaven units a bit more closely. So Thankwall is one of the top 5 icons in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, period, and I think that means there's a 0% chance we don't get him at some point during this trilogy. So honestly, I'd actually rather see Ikit Claw in the DLC and the missing Skryre units alongside him because they fit more thematically. And then Thankwall could come into the game in some other big event that he's kind of like the headlining lord for that event. I think there's a decent shot that that is how CA is going to want to handle it, and I think it's a pretty logical way to do so as well. Remember, we're going to have Make War Not Love coming out around mid-February, so there's a potential there for another Lord drop to come out as part of that event. Now, 10-1 would drop alongside Red Crescent Skinks, which are a more melee-focused variant of Skink Cohort, Razor Dawns, Flame-throwing Salamanders, and Ripperdactyls for a stronger aerial presence, which should really benefit the children of the old ones quite a bit. Like Pterodons, but with a heavier emphasis on melee and frenzy, they're kind of like gigantic piranhas with wings. And of course, centerpiece honors would go to the Troglodyte, a blind Spinosaur that spits long-range armor-melting acid, and the Ark of Sotek, an edifice mounted on dinosaurs that spawn jungle swarms around them and deals constant damage in an AoE, kind of like a Lizardmen Mortis engine. Regiments of Renown would include Eternity Warden Temple Guard, standing in for Chakax with a Guardian aura and better melee stats for protecting Slann, and maybe a unique Carnosaur with Stalk and some extra speed. I think one of the coolest Regiments of Renown I've ever seen in any game or mod alongside the Total War Warhammer trilogy was the unique Carnosaur for the Lizardmen in SFO, which I think is like 100 speed. It has Stalk, I mean, it's probably pretty OP, but I'd like to see something like that. Some big monster that has an additional gameplay element that gives it some more flanking potential would be really cool. Now, a big question is, who will fill the role of Free LC Lord? Nakai the Wanderer would be my first choice as our only hope at a Kroxigor Lord, giving them a unique star position in Albion, where he helped conquer and forge the temple city of Conquana, or he could be included as a legendary hero, like the Green Knight summoned to help turn the tides before melting back into the jungles. I think either way could be very cool. I think lore-wise, the Green Knight mechanic kind of makes more sense, but I would not mind having an extra Kroxigor Lord at all. And alongside 10 and 1, we'd have every major Lizardmen species represented in their legendary Lord choices. Gorok, the Great White Lizard, in Itza makes a ton of sense. It is a great starting city in a really difficult area of the map, has a gold mine, and it's deep in the heart of Lustria, surrounded by Skaven and Undead, which would be really fun. And then there's Lord Croak, the strongest character in the setting. Now dead and mummified and a shadow of his former glory, but still more than capable of unleashing devastating firestorms with the Deliverance of Itza, the only spell he knows in the tabletop source material. Could CA decide to go for him as the Free LC Lord? I think he has a very good shot, yeah. Maybe even the front runner right now, even if he would not be my first choice because that lack of spells is kind of an issue. But simply because of his importance to Lizardmen and the fact that he's a Lord level character in 8th edition, he would be a very logical inclusion. What I don't know is if CA would stay true to the army books and only give him one insanely powerful spell, or if they would decide to say, that wouldn't make for very fun gameplay, let's expand his repertoire a bit and make him a bit more interesting in terms of his casting. And of course, he would come alongside some very substantial buffs to Slann Mage Priests alongside him, so you'd be a lot more... Well, honestly, rework to Slann in general would not necessarily be the worst thing ever. They're not terrible, but there's no real need to get them when the casting from their skink heroes is pretty much just as good. Now for the Skaven, Ikit Claw matches up really well with what we're missing right now, and that means it's going to be time for the Ascendance of Clan Skryre. Hopefully, that means big buffs to weapon teams and how they function, but there will be some really iconic stuff coming as well. Rattling guns for mowing down hordes of infantry and cav from close range. And if you played Vermintide, you can see the kind of damage they can unleash. They're a super cool unit. Jezzails, Skaven sniper teams with huge shields for blocking return fire. And I'd like to see them function more like deck gunners, where they have very high armor-piercing missile damage and very long range, low model count like other weapon teams, and not functioning like handgunners, which I think would kind of be the cop-out easy way to do it. There wouldn't be a very good way to translate them, because if they were a full unit of 60 with like basic gunpowder range of 110 or whatever, I feel like that translation would kind of miss the mark with what they're supposed to be, which is long-range elite snipers, and I think that would really be a lot more fun than a simple unit of handgunners in Skaven form. Doomflayers, which are these little hamster wheels of destruction to provide some armor-piercing mobility out on the flanks, giving them a kind of pseudo-cavalry option outside of rat ogres, and maybe some giant rats and poison wind mortars for good measure. I don't really expect to see Vermin Lords until a possible End Times expansion, and frankly, I think that's when they would most be done justice, because that's when CA would have the capability to bring in Corruptors, Warbringers, Deceivers, and Warpseers into the fold, and I think those colorful additions are what really make Vermin Lords cool in the first place. Obviously, I'd like to see the Under Empire idea get translated a bit more. It's kind of absent from the series when it really shouldn't be. It's kind of an important idea that Skaven exists literally everywhere and will come up from beneath your very feet. That's why they're called the enemy below, and Pirate Coves are a really good template for that frankly probably should not have gone to a minor faction before it actually went to the Skaven, but I understand it's probably just when they came up with the idea rather than purposely trying to screw the Ratmen out of any content there. But being able to make parasitic civilizations beneath major enemy settlements would fit the Skaven ideal perfectly, and a Council of 13 mechanic that puts a bigger emphasis on the major clans would be a very welcome addition as well, where Pestilens, Eshin, Skryre, Molder, Scrutin, and Moors all have objectives to complete, and going down a specific path would grant you large bonuses associated with that clan. So doing something for Clan Moors would give you better Storm Vermin, assassinating agents would put you higher in Eshin's good graces, while destroying enemy walls with artillery, or killing 1,000 enemies with weapon teams, or artillery, would give you more favor with Skryre. And I think Norska handled the Favor of the Gods mechanic very well. as did the Bloodlines mechanic for vampire accounts, giving you very cool rewards that made your investment and work feel worthwhile. So something like that would be really beneficial for the Skaven campaign, I think, and encourage you to branch out and try out more different styles of play, which is really kind of the basis for replayability in a game like this. If you have a mechanic that gives you a cool reward at the end, it encourages you to go back and play the campaign again from another perspective. So for Regiments of Renown, Albino Council Guards seem like an auto-include as the giant Stormfront protectors of the Grey Seers. They are really important, and Armored Rat Ogres would make a ton of sense as well. There's actually a list of leaked RORs in the game files, had some voice acting done for them, that surely won't see all of them get added, but Death Vermin of Clan Rictus, Beastlings of Seepgore, and the Scabrous Elders of the Pox were some of the highlights. So definitely a lot to be excited about when it comes to the Skaven vs Lizardmen Lord Pack. Even if I won't be able to see my Precious Storm Fiends until sometime after Game 3, that's obviously not where this all ends, because that's just those two races. There are a lot more that still need to be brought up to speed. So assuming we get it sometime in mid-April, the Rat and the Serpent, a month and a half out or so after the release of 3K, there will still be 1 or 2 major additional content releases that will come in 2019. Could it be a race pack? Absolutely. The Dogs of War and Southern Realms are still by far the most logical choices to bridge the old and new world alike and kind of function as that go-between between the two campaigns. And it's a part of the map that needs a lot more fleshing out, especially considering the frequent undead invasions from Sartosa and the Galleon's Graveyard, which have really kind of impacted a lot of my campaigns so far. I think putting some major factions into Leia and Astalia would really kind of help prevent the Vampire Tide from steamrolling everything, which has been kind of a common theme in a lot of my playthroughs since the patch. And then in the Great Vortex campaign, you can move these factions, the Dogs of War and Southern Realms, into Lustria and the New World as part of the colonies and expeditions that are so frequent in that area of the world. But another content update that's worth talking about here are cross-game Lord Packs. This is something CA have avoided up to this point, as is the whole idea of DLC for DLC, because it's a rabbit hole that people can kind of be scared about. But if we really want old world races to be brought up to speed, and if we really want as much of the Warhammer world as possible, it is something we need to consider. And it's a subject I'm torn about, honestly. On the one hand, improving the Beastmen and the races like that, some of the early Game 1 DLCs, is very high on my list of things CA need to do. Their entire campaign and unit roster is very outdated compared to newer races like the Tomb Kings and Vampire Coast, which makes sense when you consider they were the first content drop in Game 1 when the waters were still being tested. Releasing a Lord Pack for them that gives them Doom Bulls, Great Bray Shamans, a Gorgon, and updates their campaign mechanics would be one of the best ways to finally make them feel complete. But on the other hand, it kind of rewards CA for releasing a kind of weak Call the Beastmen DLC in the first place. And it could open a can of worms that says, if we don't do our best on the first release of a DLC, it's no big deal, we can just go back and charge more for additional units at a later date. I'd rather they just get it right the first time and charge a higher price initially if they have to. If it's a quality DLC, I'm willing to pay the extra money to ensure it's up to my standards. What I don't want to see is more of this stuff like what happened in Game 1, where you release a kind of substandard DLC and then later on have to release more content for it and charge more money when really it should have just been nailed in the first place. Obviously there have been some growing pains that have now been worked out. Every single DLC release that has come after the one that came before has been better. I think they've consistently gotten better at their stuff, gotten better at their craft, but it's something that it's kind of a little bit scary. Kind of does open up a can of worms there, but that ship has been sailed, right? They already released the Call of the Beastmen DLC. There's no going back and re-releasing that in a better way unless they just want to completely rectify it here by releasing some very challenging and expensive units for free. And I'm not sure they're going to do that. So they might want to just release another Lord Pack, charge maybe a little bit less than what we got for the first one, but there are some options there. There aren't many though. It's only release that content for free or release a Lord Pack that costs money. So personally, I'm okay with that if it means more great updates. I'm okay with them releasing another DLC for DLC if it means we get really good content in this next one and maybe something extra on top of it to say, hey, we're sorry we're screwed up on the first time. But I completely understand why some people would not be okay with that. Obviously, it's not great to have to pay extra money for units that you feel like should have been included the first time they released content for the faction. So I guess the question I want to ask for you guys is, would you be okay with Creative Assembly tackling DLC for DLC if the content the second time around is quality and there are a lot of cool mechanics and stuff that get added? Do you want to see cross-game Lord Packs with additional units, even for factions that already received extra content? Or do you feel like, I paid for it the first time, if you're going to release a Gorgon, do it for free? Now, I understand that standpoint for sure, but I will say the likelihood that they're ever going to release a unit like the Gorgon for free for an old faction is pretty unlikely. I think that if we're going to get them at all, we might have to pay for it. So, unfortunate, yeah, but I think I personally would rather have it in the game than not have it at all. So, that's my standpoint on that. But, for example, these cross-game Lord Packs, or additional Lord Packs that we might be able to see in the future, are something like the Twilight and the Rise of Morslib, which would be a DLC putting Nystra and Arahan, Sisters of Twilight, against Moonclaw, the lunatic prince of the Beastmen. Or, we could see something like the Hunter and the Brass Bull, a pretty thematic matchup, considering Marcus Wolfheart killed Torox the Brazen One in the end times with an arrow to the throat. So that way, we'd be getting Empire content and Beastmen content, and getting additional units for those as well. The Wood Elves severely need an additional Legendary Lord. They only have Durthu and Orion right now. They're the only faction I can think of with only 2. And of course, their Amber system is in dire need of a rework, and the devs themselves have stated they are not happy with where the Wood Elves are in their campaign right now. So they need extra content too. Ariel would be a super logical addition, as would Drycha, Briar Maven of Woe. And the Empire, well, they're the Empire. We know all about the things they need. They need additional start positions. They need updated mechanics because their campaign is super far behind the rest of the pack. And they're also in need of their Knightly Orders as well. Boris and Midland alongside Tudigan Guard and Knights of the White Wolf and an R. Ulrich mechanic would be very welcome. Or you could go for a Nuln theme with Nuln repeaters, new artillery choices, and Lady Elspeth von Draken on her Carmine Dragon, and an Amethyst Wizard for the Empire. One of the most requested cross-game Lord Packs is, of course, the Grim and the Grom. Eltharion the Grim versus Grom the Paunch. One of the more iconic rivalries in the setting. Of course, it wouldn't be called out. We've already used Grim before. But I think that this would also be a very good inclusion because the High Elves are missing some units, and the Greenskins need a hell of a lot of work to be brought up to Game 2 speed. Mistnar off the northern coast of Ulthuan would make for a very interesting start position for the Greenskins, and maybe give us a shot at White Lion Chariots, Spear Chukkas, Effigies of Gork and Mork, and Lothern Skycutters. There's a lot that can be included in a DLC like that. And these iconic head-to-head Lord matchups would maybe be the last chance Old World races had to become fully fleshed out, before the possibility of an End Times expansion for all factions in the game. So I personally think it's a very solid avenue that Total War can take, but there's no question it opens up some cans of worms regarding the practices of DLC and what you think is acceptable in terms of adding additional content. So, a lot to discuss there. I really want to know what you all think about it. One thing that is important to note, though, is that whether cross-game Lord Packs ever end up becoming a thing, we know for a fact that CA will be updating campaign mechanics for the remaining Old World races. So, Greenskins, Empire, Beastmen, and Wood Elves with their Amber system will be getting additional lovin'. We just don't know the full extent to which that will be happening. So, at least there's some good news there. We just don't know exactly what will be going on. I would go in expecting updates similar to what the Dwarfs got with Ungrim, Giant Slayers, and the Runic Forge. And if these end up being a little bit more substantial than that, then we can be pleasantly surprised. Throw a little party, do a little jig, whatever you're down for on that front. But for Game 3, I think the inclusion of the Vampire Coast bodes extremely well for Kislev, as they are far and away the most iconic minor faction in Warhammer Fantasy, and I'll expect to see them pretty early on as DLC, or even as early as launch day as a starting faction, because I think it would be good to add in some Shining Rays of Hope and vodka swilling to an otherwise grimdark finale in the trilogy. There aren't going to be very many truly good factions in Game 3. Kislev would definitely turn that, and we already know how popular the Empire is, being a good empire of men in the middle of a horrifying world filled with monsters. Kislev would be much the same. It's a bunch of fantasy Polar Russians riding bears into battle. I mean, it's hard to go wrong on that front. And the Realms of Chaos obviously beckoning here as the unique units with lords and heroes for each ruinous faction, their unique color schemes, their unique demons, their unique Warriors of Chaos stuff all coming out to play in Game 3. Blood for the Sex God, Disease for the Lords of Change. We got Tzeentch, Nurgle, Khorne, and some Nesh all on the way. There's a ton to be excited about in the immediate future, and even more waiting just over the horizon. So let me know what you expect to see going forward, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.